Hey, I'm Sara Gonzales. Welcome to the news and why it matters. Glenn, what was the top story for you today?
I would say it is the top non-story, but it really matters. And it's what's happening in Chechnya now with homosexuals.
And by non-story, you mean you're not going to hear it
You're
anywhere
not going to
else?
hear it anywhere. You're just not going to hear it anywhere. It's really important.
Stu.
The makeup of the Democratic Party is changing quite a bit, and it explains a lot.
Okay. Andrew, Mr. Andrew Heaton.
Bill de Blasio is threatening to take property from evil landlords in New York City, which will once and for all fix any type of housing problems there.
Oh, good.
All right.
That's great.
They just needed that one little scoot, and then they fixed everything.
Before we get into that, I want to thank our sponsor, Riduzone. So a lot of people make their New Year's resolution to lose some weight. I don't know if anyone at this table made any of
know what you're talking about.
resolutions. I think maybe
My wife is putting me on literally a celery juice diet.
I've heard about that. It's so good for your gut.
Shut up.
That sounds terrible.
Shut up, right?
I'm on board. I'm on board.
You can have it.
okay.
I'll take Riduzone, you take that.
No, but so I do know the struggle of losing weight personally. I lost a bunch of weight a long time ago, and I know it's hard to lose the weight, and then it's even harder to keep it off because there's lots of good food these days all around us. That's the beauty of America, right? But Riduzone helps.
Texas, yeah. There's
in Texas.
good food here.
Yeah, so Riduzone helps if you have some extra weight to lose or if you just need to maintain, want to help ditch those cravings. You can use Riduzone. It will not only boost your metabolism, but it will also help keep you feeling full so you're not just constantly craving all that stuff. They take the little good molecule in olive oil and put it in there. So I think you should try it. It's worked for me. It can work for you too. It can work for you too. And you as well. And
Yeah, fatty.
also you.
Yes, finally.
Just letting you guys know. You can go to riduzone.com. Use promo code THEBLAZE right now. Get 30% off of a 3-month supply. It makes it super cheap. It's like $1.39 a day. There's no reason not to try this if you have some extra weight to lose. It's riduzone.com for you podcast listeners. Promo code THEBLAZE. Glenn, the story you will not hear anywhere else.
So the Russian Gay and Lesbian Alliance has come out and has spoken to the Western press, anybody that will pay attention. And they have said genocide, homosexual genocide is beginning in Chechnya. Now, this is not the first time that we heard this. We've heard this before, and there were sketchy reports about homosexuals being rounded up in Chechnya and systematically tortured and killed. They're coming out now and they're asking the West to pay attention to this. Please help us. Now, this is the Russian Gay and Lesbian Alliance. To give it some credibility, they're not willing to share their names, okay? Because they're there and they're not willing to say their names. Now, it's one thing to come out and say, I'm Bob Stevens, and you know what? I'm oppressed, and all the people are oppressed. Well, really, Bob? Because you're on TV and you're saying it. It's another thing to have to hide in the shadows and say, I can't tell you my name. Please do everything you can to confuse my looks because we're being rounded up and killed. Nobody seems to care about this. Why is it in a time when we are celebrating diversity, when we are celebrating gay marriage and the normalization of homosexuality, if you will, that we're not caring about something as important as this? This is a beginning of a genocide. And if the world doesn't care, it will only get worse. Same thing with the Uyghurs in China. I don't know if you saw over the weekend, but China has basically paid off Pakistan. Pakistan, the first Islamic country to come out and say, hey, China is rounding people up. And to use China's words, all we're doing is we're educating them so they can be, quote, normal citizens, okay? Millions have already been rounded up in China. The stories are coming out that people are being tortured horrifically and killed. Now, China made a deal with Pakistan. All of a sudden, their complaint went away. Now China's a good friend because they're in a trade alliance now. How much is a person worth? How much is an individual worth? We can't be Oscar Schindler standing on the train track saying, what is this ring? How many people could I have bought for this ring? They're being sold now. Pakistan just sold fellow Islamists or fellow Muslims in China for a price. Price, new highway. In Russia, this is happening. How much are we selling our souls for? How much, what is it? To beat Donald Trump? To read another tweet? To talk about some other meaningless story? How much are these lives worth to us? Apparently, about the price of a tweet from Donald Trump.
I mean, you look at like just the Kevin Hart thing, right? It's the same topic, right? And we get all worked up about Kevin Hart making a joke 10 years ago that may or may not have been tasteless, and he doesn't believe that way anymore. And that's a story here for weeks and weeks. Like, there are people actually dying. Seems like we should go after the low-hanging fruit here. Like, this is the one we can all agree on. Conservatives and liberals and libertarians and socialists, and everyone should be able to come together to say we shouldn't be murdering gay people because they're gay.
Can you even imagine what the torture is like in Chechnya for a homosexual? Can you even begin to imagine what those people are living through? And we're talking about what? When it comes to homosexual issues, what are we talking about? Kevin frickin' Hart? We're talking about the new candidate in Hawaii?
Tulsi Gabbard, yeah.
She was anti-gay when she was 19. Shut the hell up. Who cares? This is happening right now. We've invited the Gay and Lesbian Alliance, the Russian Gay and Lesbian Alliance, to come on. I would stand proudly shoulder to shoulder with them. I will proudly stand shoulder to shoulder with any organization, including I make the same offer I made 6 years ago to GLAAD, who wanted to talk about wedding cakes instead. And I said they are beginning to kill homosexuals in Russia. They just took their driver's license away, and they're currently throwing people off the rooftops in Iran for being homosexual. Why don't the two of us stand together and say, look, I don't agree with GLAAD on 100 different things, but on the right to exist, I stand shoulder to shoulder with them. They said no. I hope someone has the guts to stand up and put partisan bullcrap aside and stand for the life of a fellow human being.
And GLAAD, just to clarify, GLAAD has not made any kind of statement on what's going on right now.
Not that I have seen, maybe they have, but not that I have seen. I don't know, because no one cares enough in the reporting world to cover it.
I want to move on to Democrats, how progressive they are, how progressive possibly they're becoming.
I've had this indication over the past couple decades or so that the Democratic Party has moved a little to the left.
A little bit?
A tad, just a hint to the left, just a tad. And because I remember there was a time where Bill Clinton was the president of the United States, and I didn't like Bill Clinton as a president. I didn't think he was a good president. I didn't really like his policies, but I remember him saying things like the era of big government is over, and like that seems like it would be impossible to hear from a Democrat's mouth today. So there's an interesting new poll on what's the makeup of the Democratic Party. And it kind of proves this out. I think it's kind of our sense here is pretty accurate. They broke them into conservative, moderates, and liberals, self-defined. How do they define themselves? And here's the share of Democrats conservative. You see kind of go from 25% of Democrats were conservative. That's down to about 12% today. With moderates, you have it from about 50% back in the day down to about 33%. And then, of course, liberal skyrocketed in the last 20 years. It used to be conservative and liberal Democrats were the same percentage of the Democratic Party.
Wow, and then not long ago. Look at 94?
94.
So you had an equal, wow.
Yeah, and now it's over 50%. I think it's 51% now that self-identify as liberal. And I think there's a few different reasons for this. One, I think at some level the word liberal has lost the stigma. I think some of it is that, although I think that's the smallest part of it. I think there's part of it where you just have people who are getting increasingly polarized and harder and harder left in their views. And I think there's a third part of it where people who used to be a conservative Democrat have just abandoned that party and become independent. They've just said, you know what, this system is not working for me. Like, these people don't represent who I am anymore. I can't even understand these people anymore. I just got to get out of here and I'll just vote the way I vote. And I think that part of it, I think, is really healthy, but it's putting the far left in control of the party more and more?
I think it's largely that. I had a guy from the Hoover Institute on my podcast about 2 weeks ago named Morris Fiorina.
I listened to that podcast. It was fascinating.
Thank you very much, Glenn. His premise, because if you'd asked me like 3 months ago, is America getting more polarized, I would have said, absolutely it's getting more polarized. He kind of comes in and did the yeoman's research on it and went, well, America's not actually more polarized. What's happened is the parties are much better sorted than they used to be. Where, I had friends in D.C. that were Blue Dog Democrats, and that has largely stopped. Prior to that, there were Rockefeller Republicans. When you actually look at the makeup of kind of America as a whole, the actual amount of moderates, conservatives, and liberals is about the same as it's been over the last 20 years. But the difference now is that if you're a liberal, there's a very good chance you're a Democrat. If you're a conservative, there's a very good chance you're a Republican. And if you're anything else, you're probably left both of those parties, which is why the independents are now the largest plurality in the United States. I think it's like 40% of the population or so.
Yeah.
I listened to that, and you've said this to me a couple of times. That's why I went back and listened to that particular podcast, because you've said this to me a couple of times, and I was like, I don't know if I agree with that, because people are more extreme. No, the way he explains it, you're left with really kind of no choice. It's the A or B, A or B. Yeah. We're going to electrocute you unless you go A or B. And so people are forced into this, which the party then uses to make it seem like, well, look at all these people behind. But really, what would it take for you to go back and say, I am proud to be a Republican?
Yeah,
Nothing. I can't think of anything except 5 years of consistently great small government decisions. I think the same thing is being said for independents who used to be Democrats.
Yeah.
What would it take? That doesn't mean you don't vote for the Democrat or the Republican. It means you're sick of them.
And I think this is one of the big problems with the idea of a binary choice when it comes to an election. When you come down to this, it's now the Democrats are more liberal than they've been, the actual party. So the people who are picking the nominee is more liberal. And I would assume there's probably some of that in the Republican Party, although this study didn't cover it. But now there's a more liberal candidate. And when it comes down to only two choices, let's just say, for example, Donald Trump, who's, he's in the mid-40s to low 40s in approval rating. Let's say there's a problem with the economy, and we get down to the last two, and it's a one-on-one battle. People see this in binary terms. If the economy's bad and Trump's approval rating drops, and enough people are just like, I just don't want Trump, I want the other person. If they're nominating a socialist, that is going to be the only other choice. And we are just built in a system that if it's not this person, then it's the other person. And when it gets down to one-on-one, really dangerous things can happen. I'm sure liberals are thinking that right now with Trump, and they don't like him. But the same thing could happen here if a Kamala Harris or a Bernie Sanders or who knows.
Bernie Sanders versus Trump is the Sophie's Choice election for me. I don't know what I do at that point.
But I will tell you this, that especially the Democratic Party has set this up. The Democratic Party came up with the superdelegates. Do you know why? You do.
I'm assuming to stop the unwashed masses from picking candidates instead of the anointed one the party has determined.
Correct. When did they do it? Which president made them go, we got to make sure?
Wasn't it FDR? Because didn't FDR want to bring in
Reagan?
Really?
They saw Reagan as this outside horse that rode in and took the Republican Party, and they're like, we cannot allow that to happen. And so they've made it so the party has to decide. Now look at what happened in this last one. The party did decide. We found from WikiLeaks. They did everything they could to torch Bernie Sanders, right? They made it impossible for Bernie Sanders to win. Now, he wasn't going to win. He didn't have the votes, but they did everything they could to make sure they quashed it. I think that Donald Trump is actually almost a third-party candidate.
Oh, yeah.
He's not Republican. When you're on stage trashing Barbara Bush, you're not exactly a conservative, a Republican, I should say that. Yeah. You're not a Republican. He's an outsider. That's why he pulled, have you found that stat yet? 10 to 25% of people who voted for Barack Obama. And he's a third-party candidate. The only one that can do that is someone who runs as a Republican and somebody as unpredictable as Donald Trump.
All right, let's get into Bill de Blasio when we come back.
But now the Democrats have given the party the levers over to the.
Before we get into Bill de Blasio, obviously being a hero is what it sounds like.
America's mayor.
Yes, want to thank our sponsor, Relief Factor. Glenn, I know I always feel bad complaining about my pain whenever I'm around you because I know that you have
Everybody
the
has their
worst
own
case of pain.
No, everybody has
But it
their
affects
own.
your life.
Yeah, no,
greatly.
it is. I last week, I think, wrote my last full-length letter. I tried to. I love to write and by hand, and I started writing a letter. And all the way through the holidays, I tried to write letters, and I couldn't write more than half a page anymore. My hands hurt so much. That actually is blessed relief from where my pain used to be. My pain was at a level where I just couldn't do it anymore. I just was like, I don't want to live anymore. I can't do this anymore. Relief Factor has greatly diminished my pain. And it might you too. I mean,
Yeah, it's
70% of the people who try it go back. I did.
Those are really, really, really good odds. And it is 100% drug-free for any of you who are like me and are interested in that kind of stuff. But
you add drugs to it? Like if you take...
I mean, I guess you could.
just
Put it in a martini glass.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I just any pills I find on the couch, just toss them and see what happens.
As long as you're actually putting the Relief Factor and you're ingesting it, I guess hypothetically you could add drugs to it if you really wanted to. That would make Stu feel better anyway.
Don't really recommend it.
So go to relieffactor.com or you can call 800-500-8384. Get the 3-week quick start. It's $19.95. Like Glenn said, most of the people who try it keep buying it. So I think it's worth your $20 to get out of pain. All right, Andrew, Bill de Blasio.
Bill de Blasio. So he is fresh off a latest tirade on how to fix the city. And one of the things he plans to do is if a landlord is being a bad landlord, the city will now seize the assets of this place and redistribute it to a nonprofit. He's setting up by executive order a new office within the mayorship that is a tenant relations office. Now, there's already an office for tenant grievances in New York.
Yeah, but this is the Office of Bad Landlords, right?
This is the Office of Bad Landlords. And my problem, I lived in New York for a while. You lived in New York. You lived in New York too, didn't you?
I worked there. I lived outside the city.
Okay. I lived in. You live in the city?
I lived in the city. I lived in Manhattan, and I lived in Astoria and in Manhattan and in Brooklyn because I was always fleeing creditors.
Yeah,
but I finally wound up in Manhattan. I'm not disputing that there are bad landlords. I'm confident that there are bad landlords. There are probably some good systems we can put in place. My problem with Bill de Blasio in regarding housing is that New York is so overdoing it in every other capacity in housing regulation that they would do far better to actually step back from what they're currently doing. So, for example, New York has just a wonderful hallowed tradition of giving great subsidies and tax breaks to upper middle class people, pretending that it's helping poor people. So one of the things you can do when you move to New York, this is good advice for you if you're thinking about doing it.
I just want to point out, no one in this audience is thinking about doing it. Go ahead.
There's like one undercover person who's thinking about doing it.
Somebody's watching this show just for media matters.
If you're say fresh out of college and you move to the city, you're eligible at that time. Whenever you move to the city, you're eligible to get into a housing subsidy, which is a Bloomberg regulation where if a new high-rise is built, there has to be X amount of them that's dedicated to lower-income people. So, for example, let's say that my parents are both doctors, or let's say a hedge fund manager and a doctor, and I move to New York. I'm fresh out of college. I technically have zero income. Now, you can oftentimes keep that going for a long time, even after you've got a job that's giving much more, and then they don't ever check it again. And so the buildings that are there would rather have someone like you than an actual poor person. So they're going to go, oh, great, you get to come in, and now you've got just basically a subsidy that's going to be put onto other people for the rest of your life that you get to sit back and enjoy. That causes problems, and I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's who it's designed to benefit. When you get into tinkering with the housing market, which is exactly what they're wanting to do, if you make it too expensive, then I, as a landlord, I'm not going to build a new building to put people in because it's not worth my time to do it. And there's all sorts of things that you can mess up there that I think they're frequently doing. in New York. And so I would love it if Bill were to maybe take a step back rather than try and overhand command and control the entire housing market. I don't think it's going to work out well.
I don't know in what world you're living in, but typically I think the big government people don't really
You're saying
take
it too
a step
nicely.
back.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm working on. I love looking at how people think. And
He's so optimistic, though.
Yes,
it's very cute.
Yes, that's it.
I love it.
It is adorable.
I like looking at how people think and just kind of reorganizing things. And I've been considering the last few weeks. Not if you were to talk to people, not like if you're a conservative or a liberal or a libertarian, but just what is the root bad thing in America? And I think that for Bill de Blasio, it would be, well, there's not enough smart people in charge of stuff. The root problem is idiots. And if only we can get enough smart people to negate the evil idiots. And I'm like, a lot of the time, like the Soviet Union tried that, where it was like, well, we'll just put experts in charge and it'll fix everything. And it led to mass starvation and terrible art and all sorts of bad things.
And it's my understanding.
Actually, the art was pretty cool.
I was going to say,
the art was actually pretty cool.
The art.
Yeah.
The art
Some of
was
it, yeah.
great. Early art.
It's one of those things that we don't have a right to live in on Manhattan. We don't have a right to live there. If their people are building giant towers and they want to charge $20 million for each unit, then that is their right. That is no business of the government, even the city government. They should be able to charge whatever they want for whatever they want. If it's all rich people and the only rich people that are there on the island, that is something that the other people have to deal with. They may have to move to another place.
I did. I moved to Texas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I did too.
Yeah, like this happens all over the place. There's neighborhoods that I can't afford to live in, right? Like I don't have a constitutional right to walk in there and get one of the houses for $500 a month. That's not how this works. But New York has tried this for a long time. It's hurt a lot of people. It's screwed over untold businessmen who are trying to take advantage of the real estate that they purchased, that they owned. I mean, that rent control thing has been a disaster from day one.
It's a bad thing all around because you create problems that you wouldn't have. If New York was allowed to charge the rent, it's a limited resource. So let it, price controls, what? Let it figure itself out. The argument would be, well, we need all these people doing jobs. Well, the rich people, when there's no one to cook, no one to clean, no one to do anything, will have to raise the salaries of those people, or they'll figure out a different way. But what happens is, because you don't let the free market world work, the actual wages of important people like fire and police, they don't go up. New York is screwed if the crap ever hits the fan, because you no longer have the Irish cop walking the beat in the Irish section. You no longer have the Italian cop who knows how the boys are playing walking the beat in the Italian section. You now have people from Brooklyn or even further out commuting in to communities they know nothing about. And when things break down, they're not going in. What am I going in for? $30,000 a year? Why would I go in? No. You have to have the people, the community. And the only way that will work is if you let the free market sort it out.
Yeah. Back in a minute. Like you said, obviously no one has a right to affordable housing. For those of you out there who may have been, living under a rock recently and haven't yet downloaded the new Blaze TV app and joined, I don't know what you're waiting for. This thing is amazing. We've got Mr. Glenn Beck on there. We've got Stu. We've got Andrew
Sara
Heaton.
Gonzales. Oh, no, Andrew Heaton, yes.
Something's off with Andrew Heaton. We've got so many more names. Mark Levin, Steven Crowder, Graham Allen. We have got everyone all under one platform. We don't have any rules. It's amazing. You got to go there. It is blazetv.com, and you can use promo code NEWS for $10 off of your annual subscription. I'm so excited. I will never forget the day that I heard the news. I cried. I'm going to be honest with you. I cried. I was so excited about the future.
Well, we've worked really hard here, and so it was really an exciting thing for all of us. But we're thrilled to have them, and you never know who might join us next.
Stay tuned for overtime.
Credit after the Eagles lost, too.